Hi everyone, thank you for joining O2 Business webinar towards net zero, achieving mission possible. Just to let everyone know that all attendees are muted throughout the session and there will be a Q&A at the end. The webinar is 45 minutes long and please submit your questions at the right bottom corner. If you don't manage to answer all your questions during the webinar, we'll get back to you after the webinar. Today, I'm joined by Will Kirkpatrick, Head of Sustainability and Social Impact, and Vijay Chouhan, Energy and Sustainability Manager. Over to you guys.
Hi, everybody. Will Kirkpatrick, Head of Sustainability and Social Impact. I'm responsible for the strategy and the planning for our whole responsible business area, and also partnerships and key programs, and then finally communications. So happy to be with you today.
Thank you, El. Hi, everybody. Vijay Chouhan, Energy and Sustainability Manager for O2. My role is to procure utilities, so that's electricity, gas and water, and to manage the bill validation and metering teams, manage day-to-day data collection analysis for energy and carbon-based reporting, and also elements of regulatory compliance within utilities, and more recently, net zero.
We're just now going to head over to a presentation.
In 2020, we saw a doubling of net zero commitments despite the global pandemic. I find that staggering. It proves just what a vital conversation net zero is for business. And we're pleased that so many of you can be here today and to have the opportunity to share some of O2's learnings. Not that we have all of the answers, but because we're big believers in sharing and in learning from others so that we can collectively push each other to go further and faster. Okay, in terms of the agenda, we've got a short presentation where we'll be looking at overall views on the race to net zero, reflections on O2's own journey to date, and then also thoughts on the role of connectivity and technology in driving to a lower carbon future. And then after that, Vijay and Monica will rejoin me for a Q&A. Okay, in terms of the context, you probably don't need me to tell you, but the science is no longer in dispute, and we have a decade of meaningful action if we're to avoid the catastrophic effects of climate change. But the good news is the penny really does seem to be dropping for business. And we see a third of FTSE 100 companies now with net zero targets, and that equates to 2/3 of global emissions. And at O2, we're positive and optimistic about the role of technology and connectivity in driving to a lower carbon net zero future. So before we look forward at the future, I just want to cast ourselves back to capture a few of the items from O2's journey. So since 2008, we've been purchasing renewable electricity. And by 2015, we were purchasing 100% renewable electricity wherever we control the bill. We've also launched some industry first in terms of products and services. So just two that I'll reference are O2 Recycle. That is our phone recycling scheme, our handset recycling scheme, where we've refurbed and put into reuse over 3 million devices and paid customers back £250 million in the process. Or Eco Rating, which was an initiative that we pioneered, where customers were able to get environmental data and scores on the devices and technology that they were buying, allowing them and informing them to make better and greener choices. And that scheme has now been adopted by all the major carriers in Europe and was just relaunched last month. So I'm really pleased to see that initiative and that collaboration being driven across the sector. If we look at our total value chain, then supply chain is the really big area for emissions. And this has been a big focus for us over the last decade. And today, we're one of only 8 companies worldwide to have the highest certification from the Carbon Trust for the work that we do to remove carbon from our supply chain. And last but not least, net zero. So back in 2020, we set our net zero targets, which was to be net zero in our own operation by 2025, the furthest and fastest reaching of any of the mobile network operators. And it's good, I guess, to create a bit of healthy competition within our sector. So what does net zero mean to us and how have we done so far? After announcing our net zero commitments last year, we worked with the Carbon Trust to put a plan in place and to work out our areas of focus. And there are 3 areas I just want to pull out today. So number 1, if we look top right at this infographic, this is about adopting the most energy efficient technologies like our snoozing masts, which power up and power down based on demand. And since 2015, we've created energy efficiencies of 82% thanks to innovations like the smart network. The second area is in our push to renewable electricity and energy. So I mentioned to you that we buy 100% renewable electricity wherever we control the bill. Well, that amounts to about 70% of our business and our network. The additional 30% is largely network sites that are situated on and controlled in terms of the electricity by third-party landlords. So it could be a farmer's land or it could be a mast on a building in a city. And our job now is to transition that additional 30%. And since last year, we've conducted over 700 site surveys. And so we're on our way to make the overall switch to renewable electricity. And finally, supply chain. We continue to do work in this area. Since 2016, we've achieved a 35% reduction in emissions in our supply chain. And we're going to look to really keep stretching the bar there. So what have we learned along the way? Just a few things to pull out. At O2, we've got this rally cry called O2 versus CO2, and we're trying to get everybody behind this mission and to be combative in terms of how we want to tackle carbon emissions. So the first is on embedding. Now, a challenge that I often hear when I talk to other sustainability colleagues, sustainability can no longer be a peripheral activity and the domain of the CSR department. It needs to be embedded. And we've done work to align our sustainability strategy to our company strategy, brand purpose, brand strategy, and commercial strategy. Every employee has a responsible business objective, including environmental performance, and that's linked to remuneration. Our executive board have carbon reduction targets. And we work closely with the different business units, or directorates as we've called them, to develop targeted and tailored plans depending on the different function of the business. The second area is collaboration, and much like sessions today, we have to work hand in hand with other partners, customers, and varied other stakeholders. And we have to realise that our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions is another company's Scope 3. So increasingly we see this as a big focus. And we've been involved in a number of initiatives like publishing a net zero white paper to share more detail on our own journey to net zero. And the third is on action. So action, it's no longer enough, to get our own house in order. We have to go further than that. And this year we launched a brand campaign under the banner of O2 versus CO2, where we really went and promoted to our customers the greener choices that they could make. And that involved more sustainable choices through O2 Priority, promoting our handset propositions like O2 Recycle, or our second-hand phone proposition like New. So 3 major learnings for us: embedding, collaboration, working with others, and then action. So what about the role of technology in a decarbonised world? Well, we know that the biggest difference that we can make as a network is the enabling role of technology. A third of mobile network operators now have net zero targets aligned to the race to zero. And according to the GSMA, which is our network industry association, the mobile industry is currently responsible for 0.4% of carbon emissions globally, but it can have an exponentially positive impact by supporting other sectors that are 10 times larger. So mobile industries can help customers and society to be more productive, more efficient, and to reduce carbon in a number of ways, whether that's allowing customers to travel in more efficient ways or to heat their home in more efficient ways, many different use cases. And we have technologies like the Internet of Things that are already making a big change to provide greater automation, looking at something like smart metering to be able to help us better monitor and reduce energy use in the home or indeed businesses. So what is O2 doing and how can it help to build a greener economy in the future? Well, there are 4 areas. The first is digital workplace and tools. So we've seen a big shift recently to flexible working or a hybrid way of working. And O2 can facilitate that both through its mobile solutions, but also in its B2B solutions that allow businesses to effectively collaborate and to work in a really productive way from different locations. The second is on smart metering. So O2 has provided the connectivity for millions of smart home hubs across the UK. And as I mentioned before, smart metering enables customers to be able to better manage and to automate their energy use and is a key part of the UK's decarbonisation strategy. The third area is smart cities and vehicles, and whether that's through data insights that we have through O2 Motion, where we have a pilot in the Thames Valley area, which allows us to better understand and provide insights on traffic movements and flows through cities to better aid planning. This can help to reduce congestion and the emissions and air pollution associated. And we have a number of other smart cities pilots using Internet of Things connectivity. And 5G can really help to supercharge that capability. And we have had a number of different use cases to demonstrate that. For example, a 5G ambulance trial, which helps to deliver direct patient care at the location and reduce traffic as a result, or even connectivity in smart drones that are delivering medical supplies. Just a few examples of how digitization and automation can be good for business, but also for people and for planet. In 2020, we helped our customers save 1.4 million tonnes of carbon through our business-to-business products and services. Okay, so the last thing that remains for me to say is thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your time. I hope that gives you some insight on our net zero journey, why we think it's important, some of the learnings, and also thoughts on the role of connectivity and technology in the future. I'm now hoping, if the technology doesn't let us down, that I'll be rejoined by Vijay and Monica for a Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Will. Now over to Q&A. So we've got a couple of questions. The first one is, so you've given us an overview of the focus areas for O2. For example, sourcing in renewable electricity and energy efficiency. Can you explain a little more about what kind of activities are included in these different areas?
Vijay?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I absolutely can. So as Will mentioned, it goes beyond O2, what we do internally. You mentioned scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 supplier emissions. If we start to break it down and just understand, well, what does it all mean? Well, most of our emissions comes from electricity. A very small amount for us comes from burning fossil fuels or direct emissions, scope 1. So things like burning fuel in our generator, for example, fleet vehicles and refrigerants. But we are actively looking at those, and that's for us where the challenges lie. It's those harder to reach emissions and not just the obvious, well, let's just switch to renewable energy. That also flows down through to our supply chain. As Will mentioned before, we do put commitments on our supply chain to make sure that they're doing the right things to support us, because rightly so, scope 3 emissions are their scope 1 and 2 emissions. So we ask them to provide carbon efficiency roadmaps, for example, to ensure they have plans to remove carbon and to move towards zero waste to landfill, for example, including switching to renewable supplies.
Amazing. So you touched a bit about the challenges you're facing. Could you maybe give us a bit other examples?
Do you want me to take that one?
Maybe Vijay?
Yes.
Why don't I take that one first, and then you can jump in to give you a break. So, I mean, it's a big question, isn't it? Challenges. I guess I'd say challenges and opportunities. I'd like to be positive about it. 3 that I'd mention. So number 1 is about realizing the potential of connectivity and our technology to drive and to support the UK towards net zero. The second is we've recently merged with Virgin Media, just a couple of weeks fresh in partnership with them. So that's going to be a big focus to align our plans together. And then the third challenge for me would be on making COP26 a success. So if I just pick those 3 off and explain a little bit more, in terms of realizing the possibilities of technology and connectivity, I wonder how many people out there have interacted with a smart device, with the Internet of Things today. You know, maybe you've made a payment with your mobile device to a digital card reader. Maybe you've taken a bus and the SIM on the bus has connected to the signage so that we can inform you about when the bus is going to arrive. Maybe it's your smart meter, you know, which is allowing you to better understand and control your energy use. Those are just some of the examples about how the Internet of Things is already helping to drive efficiencies across the UK. And I think there are many more examples. So I just want to talk briefly about smart metering a little bit more. So I spoke about that in the presentation, but we've installed over 3.5 million smart home hubs. And according to Smart Energy GB, energy efficiency measures in the home could contribute up to 11% of the UK's reduction that's needed to reach net zero. So smart meters is one example at scale where we're using our connectivity to make a difference. Another example of a more niche use case is a pilot that we did with Northumbria Water around 5G. So we were able to connect engineers at the site to a team of engineers off-site through VR, through virtual reality. So it meant that they could physically call in those experts to diagnose and effectively remedy those problems without needing to bring a whole team up and to get them to visit the site, to stay over at a hotel, all of the sort of cost and impacts that come with that type of activity. So those are just two examples, one kind of which is already embedded, another which is much more niche. And I think kind of making people aware of this opportunity, educating people and driving those opportunities at scale is a big opportunity and a challenge. The second I mentioned was Virgin Media and O2. We launched O2 back on the 2nd of February 2002, which was O2, O2, O2. And we've just been in partnership with Virgin Media for a couple of weeks now, so it's very hot off the press. But the good news is they have a net zero commitment of 2025 for their own operations, and the job is now to align our plans. The third challenge and opportunity that I mentioned was COP26. So I completely agree with Bridget Jackson from the UN, who said that, with COP26, we have to instill the belief that we can reach net zero. And it's really up to us as a sector, as well as other sectors, but mobile in our case, to go and show just what we can do and how we can support the UK economy as a whole. So those are the standout opportunities and challenges that I can see.
Amazing, thank you. So you mentioned earlier that you have a 2025 target. Do you think you're making good progress towards the goal?
Yes, I think we are. Will, do you want me to jump in here?
Please do.
Okay, yeah, I think we are making great progress. Our net zero journey, okay, although it became public last year, started many years ago. We started procuring renewable energy back in 2008 for most of our own operations. By 2015, it was all of our directly fed supplies, electricity supplies from renewables. With net zero, now it goes further. It goes beyond purchasing electricity and into lots and lots of other areas, as we mentioned before, into travel, for example, gas consumption, diesel, and refrigerants. In terms of progress, the challenge initially was not just switching to renewables ourselves, but actually realizing that some of our supplies come from landlords and managed service providers. So it's ensuring that not only are we switching to renewables ourselves, but we're asking our suppliers and our managed service providers to do the same. Equally, the challenge, going back to the challenge question, is what do we do about emissions that we're going to find difficult to reduce? Things like refrigerants, for example. We need to cool our equipment. We don't manufacture any radio technology. We buy it in from others. So it's really important that we buy efficient equipment in the first place, so that not only is it running itself efficiently, but it's not generating too much heat, because then we'd need to cool that equipment down.
And then, thank you. You mentioned about third-party suppliers. How do you engage your third-party suppliers? Is it a limited and focused group? Vijay, maybe?
Absolutely. Yeah, we are a dedicated team to just pick up managed service providers and landlords, and it has to be a focus group because it's a part of the business that's, I guess, more messy than a typical typical grid connection. So we have a real mixture of landlords. We have some that operate multi-operator compounds where we are a tenant, for example, amongst other operators. We also have councils and landlords of single buildings as well. So it's just getting the level of engagement right. What we are finding, though, is that they are keen to talk to us about this topic because it's important for them and it's important for us. And so we think that in terms of our progress towards net zero, I'm really positive about what our suppliers are already doing. And I think that comes on the back of our long-standing commitments on our MSP providers.
Amazing, thank you. So we've got loads of questions actually. Just trying to see which one you would like to answer. So do you report your scope? I think it's on a scale from 1 to 4.
So I can take that one back, Will. So yes, we do. I mean, O2, okay, ignoring the recent merger with Virgin Media, we were owned wholly by Telefónica, who are a Spanish company. And so we report currently we report at group level. So if you head over to the Telefónica generic website under environment, you will see how we break down overall scope into those various areas.
And then how do you measure carbon emission from data use? For example, emails, video conferencing, any other tools?
Good question. So we don't break it down to that level of detail yet. We are a data company, a technology company, and the way we measure how effective we are, one of the ways we measure how effective we are is looking at what we produce as a company, and what we do is we move data around. Okay, whether it be a phone call, whether it be a text, email, our job is to move data from A to B, which we monitor very closely. Now, the way we measure how efficient we are is we take our overall emissions against the amount of data that we push through our network on a monthly basis. And since 2015, it now takes 80% less energy to push a unit of data through our network. I think to add to that, I think it's important to note here that as our network grows and demand for data grows double digits year on year, our network has to do more, and we have to make sure we're keeping up with demand. That typically means deploying more equipment, not less. So overall, as a company, our emissions are growing. They've been growing for the last 10 years, but it's really important for us to make sure that we're improving from an efficiency point of view. And that's really what we're focusing on as part of one of our work streams towards net zero. It's not just good enough to switch to renewable supplies, buy EVs, buy green gas. It's really important for us to tackle our overall emissions at the same time, to do as much as we can to remove emissions before we potentially need to offset any down the road.
Amazing, thank you.
I might just add, if I could, I think that was a good question, mostly from Melanie. I don't know if it's coming from this place, but I thought it was worth just mentioning that a big trend that we've seen for our customers is that they would like to know more about the impact of the services that we provide. I think this goes back to that point of, our scope 1 and 2 is another business's scope 3. And one of the areas the question is, what is the carbon impact of our business's use of the technology? So for video conferencing and all that sort of thing. So there's no kind of one size fits all. Obviously, a customer's usage varies by person and by organization. But as companies set net zero targets, the more that they want to see the impacts of the use of our services. So we're just looking at whether we can find any industry trends or standardization of information that will give us solid benchmarks that can then be adapted to different business contexts. So I don't know if that was related to that particular question, but I thought it was an interesting development linked to that question.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for that, Will. So there are a few questions about the tools we're using. The audience is interested. So I'm going to ask the first question about GHG emission. So what tool are you using to model your GHG emission in the future? Not sure who would like to answer this.
I can take that one back. Yeah, sorry. We use a bunch of different tools to measure our GHG emissions. Our emissions are managed centrally in Spain within Telefonica, but we use a combination of systems both within the UK and at group level. Those systems have to be compatible by geography as well, because Telefonica is, although it's a Spanish company, we have quite large operations in Latin America. So we need to make sure the platforms are compatible. And so we use a whole host of platforms. I don't want to pick out any particular one. It is sometimes dependent on the supplier. For example, sometimes we tap into supplier systems to pull information. So, for example, third-party suppliers that provide information on fleet vehicles, for example, it may be that they either upload data to our network and we share that with group, or it might be that we tap into their systems, for example, to pull information more on a more frequent basis.
Amazing, thank you. And then what tools do you use to baseline and plan your carbon reduction activities?
Again, I can take that one back as well. So there isn't one particular tool for this. I mean, we still use Excel to work through our targets and commitments. That we do have an online tool that we use to document, measure, and validate our emissions from the various operational businesses. That is available to ourselves, our third-party suppliers, and to our auditors. And the tool allows us to track against our overarching commitments.
Amazing, thank you. I'm now going to move on to the next question. So, will you have concurrent targets, KPIs, on reducing Scope 3 emissions? What proportion of O2 emissions are Scope 3? Sorry for a long question.
I can pick up the first part. I can pick up the second part of that, Will.
Of course.
To scope it. So in terms of our own internal emissions, our internal emissions represents around 23% of our overall emissions. The rest is supply chain. Value chain. Most of that is supply chain. So it's effectively our Scope 3 emissions.
I'm not sure what else I can add to that, Vijay.
I think in terms of the overall scope, well, I think it's important to note here that we do have targets around supply chain, and we are looking at widening the scope to include our value chain to be more aligned to our group commitments. At the moment, it's a 30% reduction in supply chain emissions, which for us is stretching, but it's only a short-term goal. It's to get us started on that journey. So, we do appreciate that we have to start somewhere. And although, it's not directly linked to group in that respect, I think it's a good start, albeit a short-term commitment.
Thank you. Will, sorry, did you want to add anything else, or shall I move on to the next question?
No, I didn't. Vijay addressed it all.
Answered it well. Amazing. So you mentioned about 30% of your energy being provided by third-party sites. How positive has the response been about moving to renewable energy from the one that you have engaged? And have you come across any limitations such as renewable energy available in certain areas, or cost increase, or any challenges?
So for the MSPs that we have engaged with and the landlords that we have engaged with, and it includes our franchisees as well, not to forget franchisees in stores, the response has been very, very positive. our commitments on our suppliers are not new. They've been around for years and years and years, so they've had a long time to address the big question mark, particularly around buying renewable energy. In terms of cost, the second part of the question, they've been factored in already. What we're finding is that many of those MSPs have been purchasing renewable energy for a long time, so we're less likely to be hit with a huge bill. Sorry, what was the third part of the question? Sorry.
So any limitations such as renewable energy availability in certain areas or cost increase. So I think you addressed all of the questions. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'm going to move on to smart metering. Sorry, Will, did you want to add anything else?
No.
Oh, this is a really good question, actually. So how do you achieve absolute zero opposed to net zero carbon footprint? What steps can you take?
That's a tough question, isn't it? I mean, Vijay, you're probably best placed to answer any questions like that, but isn't the answer you can't achieve absolute zero?
Yeah, you're right. Currently, not yet, and I think we're limited at the moment by technology. So I think we can get very, very close to at this stage. I'll give you some specific examples here. So where historically we haven't been able to buy green gas, for example, we are planning to switch to green gas this year. As it's more freely available. The emissions that we think are going to be difficult right now are things like, for example, diesel use in generators. We operate large, what we call switch sites, which essentially connect cores that require backups on top of backup. And we are looking at options around replacing those with greener solutions, but those solutions don't exist yet. Where they do exist, we do move across. So, for example, we operate thousands and thousands of what we call cell sites, which are antennas, base stations that you see on the side of the road or on rooftops. And historically, we've chilled those units because they've needed to be chilled below a certain temperature. What we're finding now is that the equipment is more resilient to heat, and therefore we can remove the refrigeration completely and install free cooling, we call it, instead, which essentially blows the hot air out of the cabinet instead of having to chill the whole unit. But we are going further. We are replacing refrigerants with greener refrigerants that have a lower global warming potential as well. Can we eradicate them completely as of today? Absolutely not. But as more greener refrigerants become available, we will switch to them. And when we can remove them completely, we absolutely will.
Thank you. So earlier you mentioned about Thames Valley Trail and how do you see data helping us reduce travel and switch to more renewable travel modes?
I can answer that one. So we have a part of our business called O2 Motion, which is anonymized mobile data from our users. And so what that allows us to do is to effectively view the traffic flows of people around different urban environments. So, I mean, the particular case is about traffic. It allows you to sort of really pinpoint when are the build-ups happening, at what points of the city are they happening, and is there any way that we can better plan the infrastructure, whether it be the situation of traffic lights or road planning. And in the case of Thames Valley, we've put pollution monitors a lot around the city, so we can map, pollution alongside that information about the traffic flows. So, the technology can also help to identify things like potholes in the road, because it can capture if there's been an issue in their vehicle, and that will then help to kind of reduce any repairs associated with the vehicle, maintain the smoother running of the road. So, those are just a couple of examples on the data side of things. I mentioned also some pilots that we're doing on Internet of Things, which is more 5G enabled. So again, that's using sensors. There's a trial, Smart Mobility Living Labs trial, which again has a similar type of goal, which is putting sensors and connections on traffic lights and piloting things like automated vehicles. So it's mainly to do with reducing traffic and improving CO2 emissions associated.
Great. No, thank you. While we're on vehicles, I've got another question for you. So will fleet go to hydrogen fuel cell rather than all electric battery, considering manual mining for batteries an environmental disaster? I'm not sure, maybe it's Vijay.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one back. Yes, absolutely, we'll consider those options, because there are considerations, as you mentioned, around mining materials for batteries. Equally, we need to make sure that if we are planning to go down the hydrogen route, that the hydrogen is sourced responsibly as well, because hydrogen isn't freely available; it has to be manufactured. And we just got to make sure that we follow that supply chain through to make sure that if we are burning hydrogen in our vehicles, it's from responsibly sourced power.
And while you mentioned about supply chain, how are you approaching quantifying your supply chain emission?
I can take that
Vijay,
one,
are you
Will.
able to touch on that at a high level? Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the two things that we did, one thing we've been doing for a long time is we've been working with the Carbon Trust to help us to understand our supply chain, well, our overall value chain emissions. Today, it's been mostly driven through procurement spend. We recently carried out another study at group level, which was a more detailed review of our supply chain by sector and by spend, which I think has improved the quality of data to align us more towards our net zero ambition. I think there's some more work to be done still, but at the moment it's analysis based on spend.
I'm just conscious that we got 3 minutes until end of the webinar. So I'm just going to ask one more question. And as we have so many great questions, we'll get back to you after the webinar. So the last question will be, how do you measure the carbon emission from your data storage and digital communication? I think we mentioned briefly, but over to you guys.
So I'm happy to pick that one up, Will. So in terms of how we track data right down to cell level, because it's important for us to understand demands on capacity, how those individual cells are performing, but also how much pressure those cells are putting on our regional switch sites, which effectively connect devices together. But in essence, how we measure it is a combination of pulling data in from the various networks teams into a central location, and it includes, it's not just data that we transmit through our network. We equate text messages, emails, even voice into units of data, so that we have a single metric when it comes to measuring our company's performance against the amount of data that we push through our network at any one time.
We've got 2 minutes left. Shall I choose another question just really quickly? So should Ofcom help with reporting standards for the sector in the UK so all networks are covered?
Well, you've chosen a difficult one there, Monica. I'm not sure about the answer to that. Back to you. I don't know, Vijay, if you've got any comments. I think we recognise.
I think so. I mean, yeah, I think there is a place, Will. I mean, if I think back at how we report, not just how we report, but where we look to get a steer from our parent companies, for example, we work quite closely with the GSMA across operators at a European level. That does feed into our Latin American business as well. But I think anything more that we can do at a UK level would be most welcome.
Amazing, thank you. Sorry for asking the most difficult question, but no, great answer. So unfortunately we have run out of time, but thank you so much for joining our webinar today. For those questions we couldn't get back, Will and the team will get back to you after the webinar. There's also going to be a new webinar on 5G in July 14th, so please look out for your invites. But thank you so much and enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.